currency has weakened to multi-year lows and is trading close to 19 Rand against the US dollar. Viv Govender is the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss, and he joins us now to dissect this and other moving news in terms of markets. Viv, thank you very much for your time. So, as we mentioned, it's trading close to that 19 Rand against the dollar mark. What's your outlook for the week? Should we tighten our seatbelts?
Most certainly we should be tightening our seatbelts. I think even if we have small multi-week or multi-month fluctuations, the trend is in one direction, which is towards a weaker currency. Look, on average, we've weakened by over 6% per year since about 1995 or so till now. And that is the kind of trend line. We've obviously had periods like, around COVID when we went to about 19. Right now we're at 1861. We peaked just about 1872. So we're a little bit stronger than we were like at the start of the day, but still much weaker than we were, for much of last month and so on. I remember at the start of February we were down at 17, and now we're basically almost 10% weaker. Will we weaken from here? Possibly in the longer term. Short term there may be a slight rebound depending on what our Reserve Bank does, etc., and what more news comes out of the US. But the long-term trend is definitely towards a weaker currency.
Yeah, what do you perceive the Reserve Bank should do?
Unfortunately, we are forced to follow what the US is doing. After Jerome Powell's statement yesterday, in which he basically said, to paraphrase him, he's more from the data that he's gotten, he thinks that the chances of him having overdone it versus underdone it is quite low. He thinks it's more likely that they've underdone or have more work to do to raise interest rates than that they've over-raised interest rates. Inflation in the US right now is 6.4%. They want to get down to 2%. That's a big, big move. But the problem with the US right now is that the job market looks very strong. If inflation remains as high as it is right now, eventually workers are going to start demanding higher wages, which makes inflation from temporary to sticky and permanent. And so he wants to avoid that, and that's why he basically wants to raise the unemployment rate in the US. In South Africa, we don't want to raise the unemployment rate. Our unemployment rate is already very, very high. It was come down slightly recently. But unfortunately, if we don't follow what the US is doing, our currency will weaken. Look at Turkey. Turkey's currency has weakened dramatically. It will cause more inflation, will cause more problems. So yeah, that is something to be concerned about.
Sure. Okay, the RMBB, our Business Confidence Index, declined in the fourth quarter to 36 index points. What are various business sectors not happy about?
I don't think we have to be too clever about this. Our infrastructure, especially the infrastructure run by government, has come down quite dramatically. We saw Royal Bafokeng come out and talk about the fact that they are hitting issues with regards to transport and issues with regards to electricity, and one of the reasons that they're blaming for their issues with regards to production being a bit lower. So I don't think that it requires too much effort to understand. I mean, we saw Kumba Iron Ore come out with results a little while ago, where they talked about the fact that because they were basically building up inventories at their mines because they could not transport the stuff from the mines to the ports easily enough and get it from the ports to the international consumers. So that's going to be I think a question that needs to be answered. I've spoken to many clients that are involved in industries in Africa. Transport, I mean, we always talk about load shedding, but what's happening with Transnet is also a huge problem. I mean, you can't transport things around this country as easily as possible, which is causing more stuff to go on the roads, and you know what that does to the roads eventually as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a new transport minister. Does that instill a sense of confidence from the people that you speak to? We've got a new electricity minister who says, well, this job is right up my alley. Load shedding will be a thing of the past soon.
I think that's something you've heard, I think, how many times so far? Dureja said thing of the past, Pravin Gordhan said thing of the past, everyone says a thing of the past. The past is taking a long time to get over. Honestly, we need to see some actual, movement. I think the easiest thing you could do is to have a bunch of arrests, quite frankly. I think the Dureja interview basically has made people more aware of what's happening from a criminal point of view. And unless you get the criminals out of there and punished, you are going to have this continue and continue. I mean, you can pour as much money, but if it's being stolen, there's no limit to how much money people can steal, you know what I mean? And so I think if you have a bunch of arrests, you have some high-profile people like, being sanctioned because of this stuff here, you will probably have a lot more confidence from the market. Right now, it seems to be just the same old talk about, we will do this, we will do that, but no actual actions happening. I think right now, if the market, the easiest, simplest thing for the market to basically reinforce confidence there is for, some kind of consequence for those that we believe are involved in this kind of criminal activity.
Fair enough. So we are expecting a decision by the Competition Tribunal on whether to give Heineken-Distell merger the go-ahead. Is there any reason why this deal may not go through?
I mean, the usual reasons in South Africa, we're much broader in terms of what we ask companies to do. For instance, we have PE requirements. We have, in other parts of the world, for instance, the US, they don't really care about employees, don't really care about other stakeholders except for the customer. If the customer comes out and basically is going to be ahead because of the deal, we just say basically go ahead. In South Africa, we have a lot of regulations around protecting the number of staff involved, protecting targets, etc. So there's a number of things that you could fall apart on in South Africa. I mean, we've had, for instance, not recently, but a while back, the Burger King issue where it was about the B requirements of the acquiring company. So there's a number of things that can affect this year. That said, I think it probably will go through, but South Africa, we just have more hurdles to cross when it comes to these big mergers.
That doesn't sound like you think it's a good thing. Not whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but what? Does it create then bottlenecks in the system, or it makes things slower? A lot of red tape?
Yeah, look, I mean, it does to a certain extent. I always think that, in terms of an economy, that in the short term it sounds great. Okay, you want to protect jobs here and there. But long term, what happens really is people don't hire, people really don't, become stagnant. And, the US basically has one of the freer hiring and firing systems in the world, but has like a sub 4% unemployment rate. The reason for that is that people are more than happy to employ people because they know if they don't need them in the future, they can get rid of them. There's more chances taken on people. In South Africa, it's very hard to take a chance on an employee because if you don't, it doesn't work out, then you basically have no option but to keep them on unless there's some serious negligence on their part. So the choice in the first place is much harder. Yes, it's good for workers, but it's not good for the unemployed. And we in South Africa, like I said, have the highest unemployment rate in the world pretty much.
Viv, I do beg your pardon as I digress a little bit. I think it was the quarterly labour force survey that pointed to agriculture and other industries having contributed to the increase in the number of jobs, right? But when we take a look at the quality of jobs, so you find people getting employed in the retail sector, for instance, but they hardly earn enough to be able to get to work. So while I do understand that those who are found wanting must be dealt with, are we also looking at ethical or responsible doing of business in South Africa where employees are concerned?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always two ways. You protect your workers, but you also basically have to have some freedom. I think the best approach has been taken by places like Scandinavia, where what they do is they protect the workers by a strong safety net, but they make it easier to hire and fire. So you're not as, close to the poverty line if you lose your job. So you have a social safety net that catches you if you fall. That being said, I mean, talking about, the different sectors out there, it's known what you want in your country. You don't really want more agriculture. You don't really, retail is nice and fun. What you really want is a lot more manufacturing, because manufacturing is actually the way in which you step up, workers and step up an industry and step up an economy. Retail is just retail. There's not much progression. You work in retail for 50 years. Yeah, you're better at selling stuff, but you're not really progressing. You work in manufacturing for 50 years and you go from making toy cars to making real cars. You go from making toy aeroplanes to making real aeroplanes because that's what's happened. Your expertise builds up. Japan's done it. South Korea did it. China is doing it at the moment. These are examples you're going to be seeing where you go from lower-end manufacturing to high-end manufacturing, and that's the kind of the pattern that other countries have done. In South Africa, unfortunately, of course, not just with regards to labor laws, but also with regards to things like electricity and, like I said, transport, because those things, I mean, you manufacture stuff, you need to transport the stuff, you need to have electricity available at all times to basically do things which you have done. Those are the kind of real bottlenecks that are holding us back. Like I said, manufacturing is the one sector that really historically has changed the income levels of a country, making it from a low income to first world country, basically.
Sure. Okay, let's take a look at news from Quilter. They've published results for the year ending 31 December 2022. How did they fare? Their share price is up today.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got some results coming out from Quilter. We've got results coming out from Momentum as well. Profits are up quite nicely. We are seeing, because let me look at here. I think the profit came in at £134 million, but they had a consensus of 113, down slightly from 138 from a year earlier. we are seeing, obviously it's been a tough year in terms of the market. We have seen a tough year in terms of, investor, performance, because markets have been under pressure.
Alrighty, let's end off with Anglo-American rough diamond sales value for De Beers' second sales cycle of 2023. That is out. How's the market looking?
Say it again, please. I missed that last bit.
Anglo-American rough diamond, their sales value for De Beers' second sales cycle of 2023 is out. How's the market looking?
Yeah, look, we are seeing, obviously, the biggest demand for luxury goods out there is China. That is something I think that we have to take into account. They've been shut down for a while. If you look at Anglo-American, they recovered quite nicely from the end of last year, from about the 28th of, about the end of October or so, till, the recent peak in like the end of January. They were up almost a third. They're down since that point, up slightly today, but, downside today, sorry, but they've had a nice recovery from the end of October last year. So the market's coming down a little bit. Like I said, when it comes to diamonds, when it comes to luxury goods, you get a lot you get a lot from China. To give you an idea, the Chinese, for instance, before the whole pandemic, accounted for a third of luxury goods sales in some stores or some brands, for instance, in Italy. That's in Italy, not of the sales in China. Just the Italian stores were selling a third of the stuff to Chinese tourists. So that's a huge impact in terms of the exposure to China. And hopefully if China recovers this year, as we hope it does, after those 2 years of lockdown, we could see some more recovery coming through in the luxury goods sector.
Rand Swiss Portfolio Manager Viv Govender, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.